Hello, I'm Dave March, the Spy Guy. I was saying I need to finally create that intro video, and of course I go to one website and it's like you need to do all these things. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a bit more effort than I thought it was going to be. So I do have an idea of maybe some sort of Cold War style montage, an introductory thing. Anyway, I'm a little broadcasting a little late today. Something just came up in the morning. I did just finish my Star Realms tournament, and it did not go very well for me. I was like, I just got this perfect hand, and then you must discard all 5 of your cards. First world problems. Anyways, there's a different. Talking to some friends yesterday, and I mentioned that I could go and tell them what really happened during the creation of the fall of the Tsarist Russia and the creation of the Soviet Union. And then I realized I was going through some of my books on the subject, and I'm like, that's going to be a long series. I got to do some more research, get more prepared for that. But I'm planning on doing a series of different things here. I was talking about Agent Garbo and some other stuff like that, getting into the histories of spies. But this one is going to be these things called the case files, where we'll talk about individual cases of espionage, and there'll be kind of a shorter series of stuff, not a short series, but I still have this blasted cold. It just does not seem to want to go away. It just seems to go on. I'm like waking up this morning, I'm breathing clear, and then it's like, no, you're not. Anyways, so I looked into this. I was going through the case source book, and they were talking about they have a list of various spies, some of them famous, some of them not. This one is an interesting case study. I did some internet searches just to find out if there was any more information but Prados' summary here seems to be a good summary of the case and kind of gives you an idea of how things kind of work. So John H., this one here is about a guy who was doing a little freelance work and then kind of got caught up and then got out. So we'll have a discussion here. John H. Bothwell, the man at the center of a chain of events that benefited the West, was arrested by the British on espionage charges on February 16, 1986. The whole thing turned out to be a misunderstanding occasioned by statements made to the CIA by a KGB agent who Bothwell had encouraged to defect. Bothwell's story began in the United States Navy, a service he joined in World War II and then made a career. He was a competent, decorated officer, making the rank of commander or 05 or light colonel. In 1963, the Navy's second Bothwell to take the year-long course at the U.S. Army War College at Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Been there, pretty cool place. They have a nice big archive. They did a nice tour for us. It was pretty good, though I do recall that was where I got up at one point and said, because this was the Connections, the Professional Wargaming Conference, and they bring in the academic, military, civilian, that's where I came in, level stuff. And they're talking about, maybe we'll get a sponsor back in if this guy, Biden, gets elected, and then he appoints our deputy secretary back in. Who is that? And I'm like, I get up and say, where are your allies in Congress? Why are you worried about some person getting into whether or not he gets a job in the State Department the Defense Department or the Department of War, as it's now back to call? I do appreciate that. And I understand that the name change has more than just symbology. It means that they can get around some, the Secretary of Defense or the Defense Department's told to do certain things and has obligations. And the name change allows the Trump administration to get around those and spend money like they might be better for them than the Defense Department. So that's kind of a thing. But yeah, it was but I was like, who's there? And then I got guys coming up to me from the Rand Corporation saying, oh, we used to do stuff with congressional staffers all the time, but we haven't done that since sequestration. And I'm like, This is 2019, or sorry, 2020, 2019. Seriously, like sequestration was like 9 years ago. It's over. Like, why are you not doing this? And they're like, other people like, oh yeah, maybe we should go and talk to some people in Congress. Like, they got, the guys who spend the appropriate money. And I'm like, give me a break, guys. Lindsey Graham would love this stuff. You came down and showed him around and let him play some like future war combat. He'd love that. Like, anyways, there's lots of guys in Congress who eat this kind of stuff up. And the fact that, it's like I said about the bayonets, it just takes time for people to come, like, until someone comes in and says, hey, well, have you tried this? And they're like, oh, maybe why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we think of it? That kind of stuff is why you got to get the civilians in there, because we'll ask the questions you don't like. Reminds me of some games I used to play, or I would get magazine games, go out and hang out with my friends at the wargaming club, and we would do terrible, terrible things to the games. I mean, like mechanically wise, and I would later write the designers and say, well, what happens when this happens? And we're like, why would you do that? Well, the rules say we can do that. But that's just, you just destroyed all of Western civilization. I'm like, you didn't say we could. You didn't think that players would brutally do these things, things to your poor game? No, they didn't. Anyways, back to the Bothwell case. Meanwhile, he had personal difficulties. Being at sea for all those times was hard for him. He retired in 1965 after 22 years in the service. He then entered the CIA on special operations involving naval activity. In 1968, the CIA sent Bothwell to Athens and set him up as a maritime agent, a commercial middleman who arranges fuel and food supplies or who books cargoes for merchant vessels. Athens was an ideal location because Soviet merchantmen and fishing vessels from the Black Sea needed supplies as well as intermediaries to arrange these for them in distant operating areas such as off South Africa, where the Soviet fishing vessels often operate for months at a time. CIA was interested in supplying the Soviets in order to gather information regarding their merchant and fishing fleet movements. Interesting stuff. Athens is, of course, or Greece was this major shipping hub for all of Europe. That's kind of like what they decided to do after the post-war, is to get control of the merchant marines. And the British, for some reason, gave it up to them. It's all very tax dodgy stuff. So this was the deal for everyone except Bothwell, whose marriage continued to deteriorate and ended in divorce. He resigned from the CIA in 1972, but then decided the best thing he could do was what he was doing already. So he went into private practice, right? The pace of Soviet business remained high, often demanding 2 minutes for a ship a week. He was happy, remarried a British divorcee, and continued to do business even after he moved to Bath, England in 1978. He simply commuted back and forth to Athens, where he continued to maintain a residence. As a maritime agent, Bothwell frequently dealt with commercial attaches at the Soviet embassy in Athens, and naturally a certain proportion of these individuals were themselves operating as intelligence officers under diplomatic cover. One attaché with whom he began to deal in the mid-'80s was a Viktor Gudurov, in actuality a colonel in the KGB. Typically, they would meet for lunch about once a month at the many Perseus bars to discuss their business arrangements. I guess it's some sort of Greek chain. The Gouda, meanwhile, appears to have had an agenda of his own, attempting to draw Bothwell into something resembling espionage activity. This is something I did find out going on the internet and looking around. It turns out Gudurov would later claim that Bothwell was actively working for him and was paying him $50,000. No one could seem to find any evidence of this extra spending activity. I mean, that's a lot of money now, but in 1980, that was 80s would be a lot of money, and like $500,000 as opposed to like a year's salary. But there just doesn't seem to be any, none of the CIA agents could seem to, or the MI5 who were later arrested, don't seem to have found any indication that that story held water. Have an agenda of his own, attempting to draw Bothwell into something resembling espionage activity. He often asked Bothwell to explain the workings of the U.S. government or other questions about which Bothwell or Gudarev professed ignorance. Bothwell supplied basic explanations from his American experience. As Gudarev got more arcane in his questions, for example, asking about the European Aryan space program, Bothwell gave answers called from sources at the British Press and Time magazine, while noting the questions to show what areas Gudarev was interested in. He started practicing his tradecraft. This information Bothwell passed along during regular meetings with the U.S. Naval Attaché in Athens. At one point, Bothwell even assembled a 30-page paper titled Changes in Behavior Patterns Among Soviet Officials. He was kind of like a freelance spy. But that happens a lot. Like Carter Page, who was famously burned by the FBI, was a CIA cooperating agent, where, businessmen or reporters go to other countries and come back to their home country, and they sit down and they are like basically brought to dinner, say, who did you meet with the Soviet Union or serving Russia? Who did you, what kind of contacts? And the other side does the same. Like everyone does this. This is very common practice for people to sit down with like journalists or businessmen and pick their brains after they visit. Tucker Carlson famously in one of his shows pointed out that he suspected Piers Morgan of doing this. He's like, I think every reporter in Britain does this, and no problem. I bet he gets a nice, decent meal out of it. But they're not like being paid for this other than dinner and doing their patriotic duty, which I'm sure everyone thinks of as, like, I'm sure if I were in this kind of situation. I mean, one time I was in England and I went to one of the clubs there, and I started talking to this guy who's part of the Persian underground or resistance, and we start plotting the overthrow of the Ayatollah of Khomeini. It was kind of funny. Stuff happens. In May 1985, it happened that Sergei Bokain, the first secretary of the political section of the Soviet embassy, he was actually a member of the GRU, defected from Athens. In the Soviet operating style, this immediately cast doubt on all members of the Soviet mission, particularly the KGB, which has responsibility for ensuring the loyalty of the other Russians assigned to each embassy. Colonel Gudarev appears to have felt the pressure. At his meetings with Bothwell, he began to ask the American how defectors were received in the U.S. Once he asked what Bothwell thought about the Bokain defection, and the former CIA man characterized it as a wise career choice. On subsequent occasions, Bothwell encouraged Gudarev to think about defecting. Finally, Gudarev asked Bothwell where he might turn himself in, and the American suggested the U.S. Officers Club at a downtown Athens hotel, even drawing a diagram for Gudarev of the club's entrance, exit, and bar. In February 14th, 86, Colonel Viktor Gudarev actually did defect to the United States. The event threw the Soviet embassy to an uproar. 2 officers, a KGB and a GRU, defected in a year. Yeah, that'd be a big deal. Cars full of Russians were spotted circling the U.S. embassy, which placed its own Marine security detachment on alert and called in the Greek police. Meanwhile, Gudarev, perhaps to enhance his credibility or his value as a defector, apparently named Bothwell as an agent with whom he had been working. Gudarev evidently did this even in his initial debriefings for British counterintelligence officers and members of Scotland's Yard Special Branch. Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting thing. I'll go into Special Branch in a second. Bothwell was held for 5 weeks in a maximum security cell in London's Wormwood Scrubs prison, and for several days was allowed to call no one, including his wife or his lawyer. After that followed over 3 months under restrictive bail. Then all charges were dropped, and the British government were ordered to pay Bothwell $7,500 in legal fees. His story ended well, and the West got another KGB defector in the bargain. So that's like the defectors making accusations. And so Bothwell gets kind of swept up in it and is eventually cleared. But that's kind of what we can expect to see in some of these cases here. We're going to get into some of the other ones, like Falcon the Snowman is the next or group of guys, and of course that's a movie, so I might even try to get a clip or two of those guys. That was the Soviets really stumbled into a high-level mole, and then his drug-cultured buddy gets him in trouble by blowing it up because he's using him as an intermediary. Anyways, it's only been about 15, 16 minutes now, but that's kind of what I wanted to do here with these case files. We'll go over, some of them will be much more complicated, some of them will be shorter. We'll get into like intelligence agents and all. Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. I just remembered special branch. So the British are a little different in the United States, and actually I think the United States is the one that's the most weirdly different. The FBI and the CIA are like, the FBI needs to get out of counterintelligence. The cops should not be prosecuting these things, and as I've said in other videos. Also, the politicization of it, it's like ridiculous, guys. But like, the British are wise. Canada does the same thing. We used to have our counterintelligence run out of the Mounties. The British never did this. They had special branch first, then MI5 and MI6 get created afterwards. And so whenever the MI5 needs to do, or MI6 need, it's usually MI5 because, defenders of the realm. They have to basically call on special branch to be their enforcement arm. So if they need a SWAT team to raid someone, they call upon special branch to do that. That's their thing. So they keep the cops separated from the analysts and the investigators. This is a key job to be doing here. Like I said, Canada did it with the Mounties, and then we created CSIS to do basically, we do a little bit of foreign spying through CSIS, but it's like military attaché level or civilian attaché level. It's not like the same kind of foreign intelligence gathering. We specialized in a lot more on communication security establishment, which is our role in the NSA. And from what I read when I was reading about them in the 90s, the CSC, as part of the Five Eyes, was specialized in spying on the Scandinavian and Nordic countries. That was our ballywhack. I'm sure it's been retasked by now, and but that's what we're dealing with. When I was looking into the two major books I have on End of Tsarist Russia and the Eastern Front 1914-1917, these are pretty good books on the last days of last years of Tsarist Russia. And it just turned out it's a lot of work to do. I'll be getting into it, especially since Ukraine is such a hot topic today, especially as the war seems to be about to wind down, because Trump administration doesn't want to have a fall Saigon moment on its watch, which is about to happen, despite all these guys trying to tell me it's not. Like, guys, Russians have 10-to-1 artillery superiority and air superiority. Like, it just, your meat grinder effect stuff doesn't work anymore. It's not like plausible to people who know what they're talking about. 5 Eyes. You're telling me the Five Eyes lie to us? Yes, that's what they do. Every intelligence organization is a criminal conspiracy outside of its home country, and sometimes in its own home country. And you got the people who get attracted to that kind of lifestyle. Anyways, that's all I had really for this particular file. I'll be doing more of these, as I say, probably do one a week. And we'll get maybe some panels and other things going on. Anyways, thank you for coming. If you like this, like, share, and subscribe. And hopefully I'll be able to do more as we do more. But thank you. Bye-bye.